The family sold her as Barren, but the widowed rancher said, "I don't need children, I need you." The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden light across the dry, cracked plains of the frontier planet. In the distance, Alara could see the shadows of the mountains, a dark reminder of the rugged world she had been born into. Her family had abandoned her to this harsh life not because they didn't care, but because they saw her as nothing more than a liability. Alara had once dreamed of being a mother, of raising children in the wide open spaces, but after the sickness took her ability to bear children, those dreams turned to dust. Her family no longer saw her as valuable. They told her that she had no place in their future, and with no one left to care for her, they sold her. "She's barren," her father had said to the buyer, his words cold and final. "She can't give you heirs. Take her. She's nothing more than a mouth to feed." The buyer had been a tall man with a harsh, emotionless face. He paid her family a fair sum of money, and that was that. Alara had no say in the matter. No choice but to leave the place she once called home, bound for an unknown future with a man who saw her as little more than a tool for his own gain. As Alara walked toward the transport ship that would carry her away, she couldn't help but feel a deep ache in her chest. She had never been the best daughter, but she had loved her family. She had given everything to them, only to be tossed aside like an old tool. Now she was being handed over to a stranger, a man who would use her in whatever way he saw fit. The journey was long and uncomfortable. Alara sat in the back of the transport, staring out the window at the vast desert stretching out before her. The planet's surface was barren and lifeless, much like the way she felt. The stars above seemed to mock her, twinkling in the dark sky like a reminder of everything she would never have. After what felt like days of travel, the transport landed on a small, lonely ranch. The place was isolated, far from any bustling towns or cities. The air was thick with the scent of earth and the dry desert wind. Alara stepped out of the transport and onto the dusty ground, her feet sinking into the dirt as she looked around. The ranch was surrounded by a large wooden fence, and in the distance Alara could see the silhouettes of cattle grazing under the harsh sun. The man who had bought her stood beside her, silent and imposing. He didn't speak a word as he led her to a small cabin near the main house. "This is where you'll stay," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. "You'll work here. Help with the cattle, the land, whatever's needed. Don't expect much else." Alara nodded, though she felt a sense of dread wash over her. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but it certainly wasn't this. The ranch was nothing more than a few small buildings surrounded by miles of barren land. It looked like a place where people came to survive, not to thrive. "Name's Jack Dawson," the man said, turning toward her. "I own this ranch. If you need anything, you'll come to me." Alara's eyes met his for the first time. He was older than she had expected, perhaps in his mid-40s, with rough-hewn features and a weathered look. His face was lined with years of hard work under the sun, and his hands were calloused from handling tools and machinery. He didn't look like the kind of man who would buy a woman like her, let alone offer her a place to stay. "I'm Alara," she said softly, her voice betraying the nervousness she felt inside. Jack gave her a single nod, then turned and began to walk toward the main house. "Get settled in. I'll have some food brought to you later."
"You can start tomorrow."
Alara stood there for a moment, watching him leave. She didn't know what to expect from this new life, but it felt like her future was no longer in her hands. She followed him into the cabin, where the small, dimly lit room awaited her. There was a bed in one corner, a simple table, and a single chair by the window. The walls were made of rough-hewn wood, and there was a faint smell of dust and oil in the air. It wasn't much, but it was hers. For now, anyway. The next few days passed in a blur. Alara woke early every morning helping with the cattle and the farm work. The ranch was small, but it was busy. Jack had a few hands who worked alongside her, though they didn't speak much to her. The men were friendly enough, but they kept their distance. Alara didn't mind. She had learned long ago that it was easier to keep to herself. The work was hard, but it gave her something to focus on. She didn't have to think about her past, about her family, or the life she had lost. Jack never spoke much, but his presence was comforting. He wasn't a cruel man, but he didn't seem to have much in the way of emotions either. He was a rancher, plain and simple, and he didn't seem to care about anything outside of his work. One evening, after a long day of tending to the cattle, Alara found herself sitting on the porch of her small cabin, watching the sunset. The sky was painted with colors of orange and pink, and the air was warm with the scent of the land. Jack came outside and sat down beside her, his gaze fixed on the horizon. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Jack spoke. "I don't need children, Alara. I need you." Alara turned to him, surprised by his words. She had expected him to say something about the ranch, about work, but instead he had said something entirely different, something that made her heart beat a little faster. "You don't need children?" she asked softly. Jack shook his head, his eyes never leaving the horizon. "I've had enough of that. Lost my wife a few years back. Haven't been the same since."
He paused, then turned to her.
"I need a partner. Someone to share this life with. Someone who understands the work, understands what it takes to survive out here." "I'm not asking for anything else." Alara didn't know what to say. She had never heard a man speak like that before. It was strange, but it was also the first time since her world had fallen apart that she felt like she might actually belong somewhere. "I'm not here to make you a family, Alara," Jack continued, his voice steady, "but I am here to give you a place, a purpose, and that's more than I've offered anyone else in a long time." Alara looked at him, her heart filled with an emotion she couldn't quite place. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something she hadn't felt in a long time. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jack gave a small nod, then stood up. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's another day." Alara watched him go, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't quite understand. For the first time since arriving on the ranch, she felt like there might be hope for the future. Not a perfect future, but a future all the same. And maybe, just maybe, she could find a place in it. The days on the ranch were long, filled with hard work, but they were also peaceful. Alara had learned to adapt to the rhythm of life in the wide-open spaces, where each day felt like a new beginning. The ranch was small, but it was thriving, thanks to Jack's careful management. There were crops to tend, cattle to herd, and repairs to make. It was a life she had never imagined for herself, but as time passed, she found herself growing more accustomed to it. The mornings started early, with the sun barely rising over the horizon. Alara would help Jack and the other workers with the cattle, feeding them, mending the fences, and checking the irrigation systems. The work was tiring, but there was something satisfying about it. The land was harsh, but it rewarded hard work with results, and Alara, despite her uncertain past, found peace in the routine. Jack was a quiet man, never one for unnecessary conversation, but he never asked her to do more than she was capable of. At first she was unsure of what to make of him. He was kind, but distant. He gave her space, yet he was always around when she needed help. One day as they worked together in the field, Jack spoke up. "You're doing good work, Alara," he said, his voice steady but warm. "I didn't expect you to settle in so easily." Alara glanced up at him, wiping the sweat from her brow. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply nodded. "I'm just doing what's needed." Jack gave a small smile, his expression softening. "That's all anyone can do out here. You've got a good head on your shoulders." As the days went by, Alara found herself becoming more comfortable with Jack. She learned that he was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He treated the workers with respect, never expecting anything more than their best. And though he never spoke of his past, there was a quiet sadness in his eyes that Alara couldn't ignore. She had seen it before, in the eyes of people who had lost much, who had buried their pain in silence. The ranch became a place of refuge for her, a place where she could put her past behind her. Every day she woke up with a sense of purpose, something she hadn't felt in years. She worked alongside Jack and the other hands, feeling the rhythm of the land beneath her feet. It was a hard life, but it was a life she could see herself growing old in. She didn't need much. Just a place to belong, a place where she wasn't judged for what she could or couldn't do. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Alara found herself sitting on the porch of the small cabin she called home. The work for the day was done, and the night air had a coolness to it that was a welcome relief from the scorching heat of the day. She sat with her legs stretched out in front of her, the dust swirling around her feet. Jack came out of the main house, holding a cup of something warm. He walked over to her, his boots crunching against the gravel as he sat beside her. "Alara," he said, his tone gentle, "you're doing more than I expected. I wasn't sure if you'd stay for long, but you've proven yourself." She looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I'm not leaving, Jack. This is the first time in a long while that I feel like I have a place." Jack didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a sip from his cup and stared out at the land. Alara could tell there was something on his mind, but he wasn't ready to share it yet. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Jack spoke again, his voice low. "I've been on this ranch for years, Alara. I've seen a lot of things, good and bad. But one thing I've learned is that this place doesn't care who you are or what you've done. It just asks if you're willing to work hard enough to make it." Elora nodded slowly, understanding what he meant. This land didn't judge, didn't care about the past. It was about survival, about doing what it took to carve out a life in a world that didn't always give people a fair chance. "I know," she said softly. "I've been running for so long, but here, I don't have to hide anymore. I can just be." Jack looked at her, his eyes meeting hers. For the first time, she saw something more than just the quiet rancher in his gaze. There was a softness, a tenderness that she hadn't expected. He wasn't just the man who owned the ranch. He was someone who understood loss, someone who understood what it was like to be broken and have to put the pieces back together. "You're not alone, Elara," Jack said quietly. "I know what it's like to be lost. But out here, you don't have to be. You've got a place here as long as you want it." Elara felt a warmth in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something deeper, something that made her feel like she was part of something bigger than herself. She looked at Jack, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me a chance." Jack nodded, his expression softening. "You don't need to thank me. Just keep working hard, and we'll get through this together." From that moment on, things changed. Jack and Elara began to share more than just work. They shared moments of quiet understanding, of unspoken connection. They still didn't talk much, but there was a mutual respect that grew between them. Elara began to see Jack as more than just the man who had bought her. He was a partner, someone she could rely on, someone who saw her for who she was, not for what she couldn't do. But despite the growing bond between them, there were still moments of uncertainty. Elara knew she wasn't entirely free from her past. The memories of being sold, of being abandoned by her family, still haunted her. And Jack, as kind as he was, still carried the weight of his own past. His wife, his loss, the loneliness that seemed to follow him like a shadow. One evening, as they worked together in the barn, Jack stopped for a moment and looked at her. His expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something that made Elara's heart race. "I don't need children, Elara," he said, his voice low but steady. "I need you. You're all I've ever wanted." Elara's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected those words, hadn't known how to respond. But in that moment she realized that Jack wasn't asking for a family. He wasn't asking for her to be something she couldn't be. He was simply asking for her to be with him. And for the first time in a long while, she realized that she wanted the same thing. "Jack," she whispered, her voice shaky, "I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." The ranch had become more than just a place for Elara. It had become a home, a place where she could forget the past and build a future. But with that comfort came a sense of unease. Despite the hard work, the long days, and the quiet nights, there were still questions that Elara didn't know how to ask. She had begun to notice things on the ranch that didn't make sense. Small details that seemed out of place. The cattle were healthier than they had any right to be, and the land, which should have been dry and barren, flourished with crops that grew faster than nature would have allowed. Jack's ranch wasn't just surviving. It was thriving in a way that didn't seem possible. One evening, after a long day of work, Elara decided to confront Jack about it. She had waited long enough. There was something he wasn't telling her, and it was time to find out what it was. Jack had just finished repairing a section of the fence when she approached him, wiping the sweat from her brow. She hesitated for a moment, her heart beating faster than usual. This wasn't going to be an easy conversation. "Jack," she began, her voice steady but cautious, "I've been thinking. The ranch, it's doing better than I expected. The cattle, the crops. How are we able to make this work?" Jack didn't look at her at first, his eyes focused on the task at hand. He knew this moment would come, but he wasn't ready to face it. After a moment, he set down his tools and turned to her, his face unreadable. "I've been keeping something from you, Elara," he said quietly. "Something that I never wanted to tell you. I didn't think it mattered. But you deserve to know." Elara's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack took a deep breath and ran his hand through his hair. "I didn't just build this ranch from scratch. I didn't just buy it and make it work with hard labor. There's technology here, advanced farming tech that came from a place I used to work." Elara's mind raced as she tried to process what he was saying. "Technology?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "What kind of technology?" Jack looked at her, his gaze intense. "It's not just ordinary farming tech. It's something more. Something that could change everything, Elara. But I didn't want to bring it into the open. Not here, not now." Elara was silent for a long moment, taking in his words. She had suspected something, but this was more than she had expected. The ranch wasn't just a simple place. It was a hub for something far bigger than they both realized. "Where did this tech come from?" she asked. "And why haven't you told me about it?" Jack sighed, a weariness in his eyes that Alara had never seen before. "It's from a research company, a company I used to work for. They were developing new ways to grow food on barren planets, ways to make farming work in places like this. They wanted to use it for profit, to sell it to the highest bidder, but I didn't care about the money. I cared about making a living, about having a place of my own. So I took some of their technology when I left. I built this ranch using their systems. It's what keeps the land fertile, what makes the cattle grow so strong." Alara's mind raced with the implications of what Jack was telling her. This was no ordinary ranch. It was a technological marvel, a place that shouldn't even exist on a planet like this. The more she thought about it, the more questions she had. "But if it's so valuable, Jack," she asked, her voice shaking slightly, "why haven't you been worried about someone finding out?" "About someone coming to take it from you?" Jack's expression darkened, and Alara saw the truth in his eyes. "That's why I didn't want you to know, because I knew the day would come when someone would find out. And I didn't want you to be caught up in it. I didn't want you to get hurt." Alara stepped closer, her heart aching for him. She understood his fear, his need to protect her. "But there was more to it than that. Jack," she said softly, "we're in this together now. You don't have to protect me from the truth. Whatever's coming, we'll face it together." Jack's gaze softened, and for a moment, he seemed like the man she had come to know. The quiet, strong rancher who had shared his life with her. But there was something else there. Something she hadn't seen before. Something that told her this wasn't just about the ranch. This was about a past that Jack couldn't escape. Before Jack could respond, a loud noise interrupted them, a blast of static from the communications tower. The ranch had its own system for communicating with the outside world, but it was old and unreliable. It wasn't often used, but when it did go off, it was usually because something important was happening. Jack's eyes narrowed as he walked toward the tower, Alara following closely behind. He grabbed the receiver and listened for a moment, his face hardening as the static cleared. "What is it?" Alara asked, her voice tense with anticipation. "It's from Talon," Jack said grimly, his hand tightening around the receiver. "He's heard about the technology. He's coming for it." Alara's heart sank. Talon? The name sent a chill down her spine. Garrick Talon was a rival rancher, but he was more than just a landowner. He was a ruthless businessman who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. Jack had warned her about him before, but she hadn't realized just how dangerous he was. "How soon?" Alara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Too soon," Jack replied, his tone sharp. "He'll be here within a day. He's bringing a crew with him, and they won't stop until they've taken everything." Alara's mind raced. She had come to care about Jack, about this place. She couldn't let it all be taken away, not without a fight. "We can't let him take it," she said, her voice firm. "We'll fight back." Jack looked at her, a mixture of surprise and admiration in his eyes. For the first time, he saw her as more than just a partner in work. She was a partner in everything, the good and the bad, the light and the dark. "I didn't think you'd want to get involved in all this," he said quietly. "I don't want to just survive, Jack," Alara replied, her gaze steady. "I want to protect what we've built. We can't let Talon take it without a fight." Jack gave a small, grim smile. "All right, then. We'll fight together." The day Talon arrived felt like any other. The sun still rose over the rugged plains, casting its soft glow over the land. But the calm was deceiving. Jack and Alara stood at the edge of the ranch, their eyes scanning the horizon. They knew what was coming, and neither of them could pretend it wasn't looming over them. Talon's crew had arrived just after dawn, their vehicles kicking up clouds of dust as they rolled onto the ranch grounds. Alara watched as the men climbed out, their faces hardened and intent on business. They were a rough group, their weapons visible on their hips, and the look in their eyes made it clear that they had no intention of negotiating. "We need to move fast," Jack said, his voice low but steady. He had always been a man of action, and now was no different. "They won't stop until they have what they want." Alara nodded, her heart pounding. She wasn't afraid, not anymore. She had spent too much of her life running, hiding, being controlled. Now she had a place, a life she had fought for, and she wasn't about to let it slip through her fingers. Jack turned toward her, his gaze softening. "I didn't want you to be part of this. I never wanted to drag you into the mess I've made." Alara stepped closer, her eyes unwavering.
You didn't drag me into anything.
"I'm here because I want to be, and we'll protect this place together." Jack gave a small appreciative nod. He had always worked alone, relying on his own strength and determination to keep things running. But now, he realized how much stronger they were together. Talon's men approached the main house, and Jack motioned for Alara to follow him. They made their way toward the barn, where Jack kept the ranch's most valuable equipment and resources hidden. The technology that had made this place thrive, the same technology that Talon wanted, was stored there, and it was the key to their survival. "We need to act fast," Jack said as they moved inside the barn. "I've got a plan, but it'll take both of us. You've learned enough about the tech to help. We need to disable Talon's crew before they get close to the main systems." Alara's pulse quickened. She had never been in a fight like this before. But she wasn't about to back down now. She had spent too many years watching from the sidelines. It was time to take control. Jack showed her the main control panel for the farming tech, the heart of the ranch's success. He quickly began to adjust settings, shutting down parts of the system that would prevent Talon's men from getting what they wanted. The ranch had been designed with security measures in mind, but Jack had to act quickly to ensure that nothing could be stolen. "All right," Jack said, his fingers flying over the controls. "We've got a few minutes before Talon realizes what's happening. We need to set up an ambush." Alara nodded, her mind racing. They couldn't let Talon get close to the control systems, and they couldn't afford to make mistakes. They had one chance to protect everything they had worked for. Jack handed her a rifle, and she took it without hesitation. It wasn't the first time she had handled a weapon, but it was the first time she felt a deep, urgent need to protect something. She wasn't just holding the rifle for herself. She was holding it for the ranch, for Jack, for the life they had built together. "Stay close," Jack said, his voice firm. "We'll split up. I'll take the north side, and you take the south. Keep your distance, but be ready. If they get past us, we lose everything." Alara didn't need to hear more. She understood the gravity of the situation. She knew what was at stake. She wasn't going to let Jack face this alone. They moved quickly, each taking their position as Talon's men approached. Alara crouched behind a pile of old crates, her heart racing as she waited for the right moment. Her eyes never left the approaching group, watching their every move. They were getting closer, but they hadn't seen her yet. Jack's voice crackled over the comms. "Wait for my signal." Alara took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had never felt more alive than she did in this moment, knowing that she was fighting for something worth keeping. This ranch, this place, was more than just land. It was the only home she had ever truly known. Talon's men moved into position, just a few hundred yards from where Alara crouched. She could hear their footsteps, the creak of their boots on the dry earth. They were too close now. Jack's signal came through the comms, a quick, sharp tone. Alara raised her rifle, her finger on the trigger, and as Talon's men passed by, she opened fire. The first shot rang out, sending one of the men crashing to the ground. The others scattered, returning fire as they tried to locate her. But Alara was fast, moving with the precision Jack had taught her. She darted from one cover to another, always staying one step ahead. The shots rang out in the distance, echoing through the quiet night. But Alara felt a calmness settle over her. This was her fight. This was her time. Meanwhile, Jack was working from the north side, his rifle firing with deadly accuracy as he picked off Talon's men one by one. His aim was true, and he didn't waste a shot. Alara could hear him on the comms, directing their efforts, keeping them in sync. "Don't let them flank you," Jack's voice said sharply. "Stay focused, Alara. We're almost there." Alara gritted her teeth and took another shot, watching as another one of Talon's men fell. She could hear their leader shouting orders, but it was too late. They were surrounded, and they had nowhere to go. Jack's voice came through again, this time with more urgency. "Move to the barn!" Alara didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward the barn, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She could see the men trying to break through the entrance, but Jack was already there, holding them off. Alara joined him, taking cover behind a stack of crates. The fight wasn't over, but they had the upper hand. Talon's men were starting to retreat, realizing that they were outmatched. Alara could see the fear in their eyes, and she knew they were beaten. "We did it," Alara said, her voice hoarse but filled with relief. Jack looked at her, a proud smile crossing his face. "We did." As the last of Talon's crew fled, Jack turned to Alara. "We're not done yet. There's more to do. But for now, we've won." Alara nodded, her heart still racing, but she knew that the battle was over. They had protected the ranch, and more importantly, they had protected their future. As they stood together looking out over the land they had fought for, Alara realized that she had found something she never thought possible, a place to call home, a purpose, and a partner to stand beside her through it all.